guy from Northeastern, no, from Samburu, who was discussing whether the that bit of the funds that is kept for the marginalized, whether it should be given to the constituency or not. And the National Assembly passed it, but it is still within the Senate, which is yet to look at it. If you ask my personal view, it will be even difficult to pass it, because senators will be asked whether these funds should go to the constituencies when they are in charge of counties. So I can, this is my personal view, I can see senators saying, well, let us keep this at the county, meaning that it may not be passed. And so that is where we are in terms of constitutional changes. So when people say over that Bunge, you are changing the constitution, government, you are changing, let's be honest, let us be fair to the government also. There has not been any change to the constitution. But let's go to the second one, the middle one, legislative violations. Now that is where we are. Legislation which is prepared to undermine the constitution. Now that is the unique hybrid of the problem we have in Kenya. Knowing very well that they have changed the constitution, now there is an attempt to create laws which undermine the very constitution. See, this is where the problem is. And it has been done with a lot of ingenuity. You have to be very clever, because if you make a legislation which is unconstitutional, obviously it will be shot down as unconstitutional. But they are very clever. They bring in legislation which seem to enter into the constitutional framework, but has the effect of watering down the constitution. That is where what you had with the security laws that we were talking about. That is where you had the problem of the Auditor General that John has talked to you this morning. That is where you have several other legislation, the media law. When you're talking about this religious one, this has nothing to do with bills. Again, you need to understand. This is a regulation which is by the executive, but also has the effect of neutralizing the constitution. So you have the executive that canvasses legislative proposals, but which legislative proposal has the effect of watering down the constitution. But let's go to the right-hand side, which is the most important thing this morning, and that is why I have had to rewrite my notes. Administrative interventions. This morning I don't want to play politics, and I don't want to speak politics, because that's really my business. That's how I earn a living. But today I want to talk from facts rather than from politics. Now, administrative interventions is therefore what you do as the executive to be able, and this is what we were being asked here, that do we have that concept, the value system of the Constitution, so that even as we implement it, we have the spirit and the letter of the Constitution in what we do. Now, that is the biggest problem in my view. Now, I just want to give you a few bullets of things which have happened that would help you reflect on how administrative actions have had the effect of undermining the Constitution. Tom Wolf, I think you gave us what I consider to be a theoretical basis upon which we are able to discuss this thing. You talked about active threats and passive threats. Now, let me talk about the active threats that you spoke about. Veto powers. You see, yes, the president has veto powers. When Parliament passes legislation, legislation will go to the executive, and the executive, the president, will look at it and then see if he's comfortable with A or B. If he is not comfortable, the Constitution says he will return it to the National Assembly or to the Senate, wherever it came from. But the Constitution does not say that the president brings it back with a text. You see, the president writes the law and say, you in National Assembly, this is what I want to see. So you go and pass what I've said. Now, what will happen is, when it comes back, Parliament is in handcuffs, because you can only disagree with the president if you are able to marshal 2/3 of that house, which, just like changing the Constitution, is nearly impossible. So he knows that. So what he does is he throws it back and says, you have to pass it now in this way. So now you have a president who is writing the law, and yet we have a president in which the executive has nothing to do with the lawmaking. It is a sole preserve of the legislature. And we come, in other language, we are gagged. And the next day you see it, it is law, because that system of veto powers. In US, for example, there is also veto power. And as far as I'm aware, it has been there from since Jefferson, but has only been used, I think, 3 times in the history of US. Only 3 times. Meaning that the executive is aware that they don't make the law. The law is made by the people's representative, because the people's representatives brings that law to you for public participation. That is one. Transfer of authority, transfer of functions, and vertical release of funds. That's another bullet. You know, county government has become then the hub of this constitution. But what does the executive do? It has nothing to do with the legislation. It has nothing to do with the constitution. They starve the counties. Counties will never get that money. Yes, we passed that so much money should go there, but it takes more than a year to get that money down there. In fact, they say that some of the counties are too young to be able to be given some functions because they cannot do it. So what do you have here? You have somebody who is messing up with the structure of government, national and county, just because of that administrative action of starving the counties for funds. Now, if then there is national government and then there is county government, it is logical that national government is answerable to the county government, just as county government is answerable to the national government. Both of them have fiduciary, they are in a marriage relationship. But you see what? The national government has never conceptualized that marriage relationship. They deal with the counties the way they want. They think about it like the Moi era of district focus. It is just you know, an extension of some part that they can give money when they want or when they don't want. Now that is the problem. This is why county governments are saying, if you are the one who is going to get Eurobond and all these monies, then we need to know how you are using it, because that Eurobond comprises the money which ultimately will be divided between you and I. So I have to know what it is, how it is you are collecting that money everywhere. But the county government national government says, no, I'll do as I wish. That is another administrative action which has nothing to do with the laws. But now that I'm talking about Eurobond, let's talk about Eurobond. Those are the issues we must speak about. Now, you see, if you cannot, you see, the reason why we passed the Constitution was so that we put managers, proper managers, in charge of our finances. Because at the end of the day, economic activity or growth is much more important than everything else we do. So if there is a national government that is unable to account to its people, how money is raised, how money is utilized, are they not standing on the way of the same constitution? That's what you need to ask. The constitution says, if you get money from wherever, you must deposit it in the consolidated fund. There is no other sentence. It just says like that. Unless you have a legislation which creates what we call a contingency fund. And all they had to do was very simple. Before they opened this account, they talked about that legislation in the National Assembly and say that now we have some surplus money and we want to keep it in a contingency fund. That would have been constitutional. But some mandarins feel that they have every decide that now take a chunk of Kenyans' money and put in an account. It's unconstitutional. Even before we go far, even before we ask them what this money did, what they did is unconstitutional. Now, the last of them, no, the second last, is Supreme Court that John spoke about. It's a live debate now. You have to think it through. I mean, it worries me. Because Supreme Court, that constitution gave it wide powers. It does advisory. If there are conflicts between institutions, it will reconcile those institutions by doing advisory opinion. It is the last court that you as a Kenyan will take the government to, or anybody else that is seeking your rights. That high court, that court called Supreme Court, was really a kangaroo court. Where are we now as Kenyan citizens? Where is the Constitution? What do we have? Is it a paper then? Now we only have a paper because there is no vanguard, there is no look after the same Constitution. So it worries me what is unfolding in the Supreme Court. And just like you hear, everybody else who has been to Supreme Court is asking, then my case was not handled properly. Then we should reopen it. Yes, I also have a case which went there. I also had a case which went there, which was, I think, the first case to have been had. Which I think because, I mean, you know, if you are used to putting your hand in a till, it just didn't happen yesterday. It is a character that you have been used to. So I'm thinking that even when my case was being done, probably somebody must have been seen. So that is, now I'm talking about the judiciary, that is now something which helps to violate the Constitution. The last one in the series is election funds. Election. You know, do anything with election. I don't care whom you vote to. I don't care whether you want, you know, what you want to do with your vote. But don't disenfranchise Kenyans. Let every Kenyan who is able have a vote. Because that's the only way we can strengthen. I mean, election is the foundation of all these institutions that we have. It is the basis. Now we are going for voter registration. The most important thing in the election cycle, not that voting day. What is most important right now is to give every Kenyan a vote. And you hear that the government has withheld funds from IEBC. Now you hear that there will be only one kit in every ward. What is your value? Is it your value for people to go to the election or people to have the vote? I suggest to you that what we are going through right now is mass, gross violation of the Constitution. Nothing else will compare to this. That young people, those that did not have votes in the last elections are unable to access that card called the voting because you have withheld the money which had been budgeted for and which you should have availed had you not borrowed the Eurobond. These are the things Kenyans have. I'm not talking about you voting for anybody. I don't know whom you're going to vote for. I don't care. But have the vote. Because that is, in my view, what makes you as the Mwananchi to have the power and call this constitution, because this constitution says, we are the people. So how are you going to be we the people when you don't have the vote to decide? These are the issues that this government is cleverly doing, knowing that they can't change the constitution. Knowing that even these laws, if they pass them, like the security laws they passed, we took it to court and it was brought down. The Auditor General, we are now